Paso, Texas, is Terry Hammond, a guardianship attorney and past executive director of the National Guardianship Association. And also with us from Sacramento, California, Assemblymember Dave Jones. He sponsored a law that overhauled California's guardianship system 4 years ago. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you very much.
Assemblymember Jones, we just saw the good and the bad in that piece, the good and the bad of guardianships. I know they're called conservatorships in California. What did you see in the system that prompted you to get involved in the issue?
Danny Tate's story was far too common in California, and it was a story that was not limited just to family members here in this state. We also discovered that private professional conservators were preying on seniors and other vulnerable adults, meeting them at community centers, befriending them, learning that they had assets, then running into court, getting temporary conservatorships established that allowed them to have total control over their finances and most intimate details. We discovered case after case of circumstances where conservators were not doing what they're supposed to do, which is to act in the interest of the person they're in charge of, but rather were acting in their own personal interest, plundering people's estates, taking over their assets, moving them out of their homes, putting them inappropriately in nursing homes. The list went on and on.
Terry Hammond, you've been involved in guardianships for almost 2 decades. How would you describe the guardianship system in the nation?
Well, it's very difficult to call what we have in the United States a guardianship system. We have over 3,000 counties, and guardianship is done to some degree about 3,000 different ways. The federal government is not involved in guardianship, does not have a role in guardianship. It's all done at a local level based on state statutes. So really we have state guardianship systems with very little coordination from the national government or federally.
Dave Jones, you described some of the problems that you saw in the conservatorship system, the guardianship system in California. Spell out for us the major changes that the law you drafted made in your system.
We held a number of hearings, and what we discovered here in California was that there was inadequate court oversight of conservators or guardians. And so what my legislation did was to require that the courts provide more oversight by hiring court investigators who would go out and meet with family members and neighbors and friends of the proposed conservatee to assess whether or not they needed a conservator. That these investigators would go out when an application was made for a temporary conservatorship, because in those cases oftentimes you had private professional fiduciary conservators or family members running into court saying that there was an emergency and that the court had to issue an order right away, but in many cases the need simply wasn't there. We also required, instead of a once every 2-year visit by these investigators, that 6 months after the appointment of a conservator, the investigator go out again, and then every year thereafter there be an independent investigation. In addition, in California, up to that point in time, before my legislation passed, you had to get a license to wash the hair of a poodle, but you didn't have to get a license to be a private professional conservator. And so we established a licensing bureau, education standards, and an opportunity for administrative oversight of individuals performing this role too. I want to note that Kim's story, which is of a family member who intervenes, and appropriately so, and takes over the management of a loved one's finances and care, really, I think, characterizes the majority of family members and the majority of private professional fiduciaries. But we discovered in California that there are some family members and some private professional fiduciaries who are not doing the right thing, and we needed to dramatically increase oversight to prevent the kind of things that happened to Danny Tate.
And let me pick up on that point and ask Terry Hammond, I mean, what is it, for most guardians, what is it like being a guardian?
Well, it's a big, serious job. Lots of times if there are disputes within the family, the guardian is getting shot at from all angles. You step in and assume a person's healthcare decisions and financial decisions. You have to report to the court. You have to post a bond. Unfortunately, sometimes people shy away from guardianship because there is so much responsibility and the duties are so burdensome. But the fact of the matter is, for example, in Mr. Tate's story, we heard about a power of attorney that was initially executed and then a guardianship that was followed up with that. There are many, many troubling aspects to that case. I would say that case is aberrant compared to what we normally see, because when you go to court, the court will typically take the duties and responsibilities assigned very seriously, and in that case it appears that years have gone by without really much accounting or much accountability.
Dave Jones, does California, given its budget situation, really have the money to make that system work? Are these investigations being done? Is this monitoring being done?
Yes, the work is being done, and Terry's correct. I think judges do take it very seriously, but what we found in California was that they were overburdened, and that a culture began to develop in some courts where they had familiarity with certain private professional conservators, and they weren't performing their independent oversight role. And so that's why we enacted these series of reforms.
Terry Hammond, we heard what California sees as a fix to some of the problems that existed there. I know you said we don't have a real system across the whole country, but what do you think the fix ought to be? What is the most important thing that people who are worried about this ought to be trying to change?
Well, I think that your viewers need to understand that the rights that are being taken away in guardianship and conservatorship proceedings are the same constitutional fundamental rights that every American has. We would like to see legislatures be more proactive and, in fact, appropriate necessary funding to allow these very specialized guardianship courts to have investigators, to have auditors, to have the staff necessary to monitor these cases. There's no way to avoid guardianship and conservatorship on people with diminished capacity. We have to have people taking care of people, but we do need reasonable safeguards in place as well.
You're right, there's no way to avoid it, and it's a big problem. I appreciate both of you talking to us about it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila.